Chapter 4. The Talking Cricket Scolds Pinocchio. While poor Geppetto was being taken to prison for no fault of his, that imp Pinocchio, finding himself free from the clutches of the soldier, ran off as fast as his legs could carry him. That he might reach home, the quicker he rushed across the fields, and in his mad hurry he jumped high banks, thorn hedges, and ditches full of water. Arriving at the house, he found the street door ajar. He pushed it open, went in, and having fastened the latch, threw himself on the floor and gave a great sigh of satisfaction. But soon he heard someone in the room who was saying, "Cry, cry, cry!" "Who calls me?" said Pinocchio in a fright. "It is I." Pinocchio turned round and saw a big cricket crawling slowly up the wall. "Tell me, cricket, who may you be?" "I am the talking cricket, and I have lived in this room 100 years or more." "Now, however, this room is mine," said the puppet, "and if you would do me a pleasure, go away at once, without even turning round." "I will not go," answered the cricket, "until I have told you a great truth." "Tell it me, then, and be quick about it." "Woe to those boys who rebel against their parents and run away from home. They will never come to any good in the word, and sooner or later they will repent bitterly. Sing away, cricket, as you please and as long as you please. For me, I have made up my mind to run away tomorrow at daybreak, because if I remain, I shall not escape the fate of all other boys. I shall be sent to school and shall be made to study either by love or by force. To tell you in confidence, I have no wish to learn. It is much more amusing to run after butterflies or to climb trees and to take the young birds out of their nests. Poor little goose! But do you not know that in that way you will grow up a perfect donkey, and that everyone will make fun of you?" "Hold your tongue, you wicked, ill-omened croaker!" shouted Pinocchio. But the cricket, who was patient and philosophical, instead of becoming angry at this impertinence, continued in the same tone. "But if you do not wish to go to school, why not at least learn a trade, if only to enable you to earn honestly a piece of bread?" "Do you want me to tell you?" replied Pinocchio, who was beginning to lose patience. "Among all the trades in the world, there is one that really takes my fancy." "And that trade, what is it?" "It is to eat, drink, sleep, and amuse myself, and to lead a vagabond life from morning to night." "As a rule," said the talking cricket, "all those who follow that trade end almost always either in a hospital or in prison." "Take care, you wicked, ill-omened croaker! Woe to you if I fly into a passion! Poor Pinocchio, I really pity you. Why do you pity me? Because you are a puppet, and what is worse, because you have a wooden head." At these last words, Pinocchio jumped up in a rage, and snatching a wooden hammer from the bench, he threw it at the talking cricket. Perhaps he never meant to hit him, but unfortunately it struck him exactly on the head, so that the poor cricket had scarcely breathed to cry, "Cry, cry, cry," and then he remained dried up and flattened against the wall. Chapter 5. The Flying Egg. Night was coming on, and Pinocchio, remembering that he had eaten nothing all day, began to feel a gnawing in his stomach that very much resembled appetite. After a few minutes, his appetite had become hunger, and in no time his hunger became ravenous. Poor Pinocchio ran quickly to the fireplace, where a saucepan was boiling, and was going to take off the lid to see what was in it. But the saucepan was only painted on the wall. You can imagine his feelings. His nose, which was already long, became longer by at least 3 inches. He then began to run about the room, searching in the drawers and in every imaginable place, in hopes of finding a bit of bread. If it was only a bit of dry bread, a crust, a bone left by a dog, a little mouldy pudding of Indian corn, a fishbone, a cherry stone, in fact, anything that he could gnaw. But he could find nothing. Nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. And in the meanwhile, his hunger grew and grew. Poor Pinocchio had no other relief than yawning, and his yawns were so tremendous that sometimes his mouth almost reached his ears. And after he had yawned, He spluttered and felt as if he were going to faint. Then he began to cry desperately, and he said, "Then Talking Cricket was right. I did wrong to rebel against my papa and to run away from home. If my papa were here, I should not now be dying of yawing. Oh, what a dreadful illness hunger is!" Just then he thought he saw something in the dust heap, something round and white that looked like a hen's egg. To give a spring and seize hold of it was the affair of a moment. It was indeed an egg. Pinocchio's joy was beyond description. Almost believing it must be a dream, he kept turning the egg over in his hands, feeling it and kissing it. And as he kissed it, he said, "And now, how shall I cook it? Shall I make an omelette? No, it would be better to cook it in a saucer. Or would it not be more savory to fry it in the frying pan? Or shall I simply boil it? No, the quickest way of all is to cook it in a saucer. I am in such a hurry to eat it." Without loss of time, he placed an earthenware on a brazier full of red-hot embers. Into the saucer, instead of oil or butter, he poured a little water, and when the water began to smoke, tack! He broke the eggshell over it and let the contents drop in. But instead of the white and the yolk, a little chicken popped out very gay and polite. Making a beautiful courtesy, it said to him, "1,000 thanks, Master Pinocchio, for saving me the trouble of breaking the shell. Adieu until we meet again. Keep well, and my best compliments to all at home." Thus saying, it spread its wings, darted through the open window, and filing away, was lost to sight. The poor puppet stood as if he had been bewitched, with his eyes fixed, his mouth open, and the egg-shell in his hand. Recovering, however, from his first stupefaction, he began to cry and scream, and to stamp his feet on the floor in desperation, and amidst his sobs he said, "Ah, indeed, the Talking Cricket was right. If I had not run away from home, and if my papa were here, I should not now be dying of hunger. Oh, what a dreadful illness hunger is!" And, as his stomach cried out more than ever, and he did not know low to quiet it, he thought he would leave the house and make an excursion in the neighborhood in hopes of finding some charitable person who would give him a piece of bread. Chapter 6. Pinocchio's feet burned to cinders. It was a wild and stormy night. The thunder was tremendous, and the lightning so vivid that the sky seemed on fire. Pinocchio had a great fear of thunder, but hunger was stronger than fear. He therefore closed the house door and made a rush for the village, which he reached in 100 bounds, with his tongue hanging out and panting for breath like a dog after game. But he found it all dark and deserted. The shops were closed, the windows shut, and there was not so much as a dog in the street. It seemed the land of the dead. Pinocchio, urged by desperation and hunger, took hold of the bell of a house and began to ring it with all his might, saying to himself, "That will bring somebody." And so it did. A little old man appeared at a window with a nightcap on his head and called to him angrily, "What do you want at such an hour? Would you be kind enough to give me a little bread?" "Wait there, I will be back directly," said the little old man, thinking it was one of those rascally boys who amuse themselves at night by ringing the house bells to rouse respectable people who are sleeping quietly. After half a minute, the window was again opened, and the voice of the same little old man shouted to Pinocchio, "Come underneath and hold out your cap." Pinocchio pulled off his cap, but just as he held it out, an enormous basin of water was poured down on him, soaking him from head to foot, as if he had been a pot of dried-up geraniums. He returned home like a wet chicken, quite exhausted with fatigue and hunger. And having no longer strength to stand, he sat down and rested his damp and muddy feet on a brazier full of burning embers. And then he fell asleep, and whilst he slept his feet, which were wooden, took fire, and little by little they burning away and became cinders. Pinocchio continued to sleep and to snore as if his feet belonged to someone else. At last, about daybreak, he awoke because someone was knocking at the door. "Who is there?" he asked, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "It is I," answered a voice, and Pinocchio recognized Geppetto's voice. Chapter 7. Geppetto gives his own breakfast to Pinocchio. Poor Pinocchio, whose eyes were still half shut from sleep, had not as yet discovered that his feet were burnt off. The moment, therefore, that he heard his father's voice, he slipped off his stool to run and open the door. But after stumbling 2 or 3 times, he fell his whole length on the floor, and the noise he made in falling was as if a sack of wooden ladles had been thrown from a 5th story. "Open the door!" shouted Geppetto from the street. "Dear Papa, I cannot," answered the puppet, crying and rolling about on the ground. "Why can't you?" "Because my feet have been eaten." "And who has eaten your feet?" "The cat," said Pinocchio, seeing the cat, who was amusing herself by making some shavings dance with her forepaws. "Open the door, I tell you," repeated Geppetto. "If you don't, when I get into the house, you shall have the cat from me." "I cannot stand up. Believe me. Oh, poor me, poor me. I shall have to walk on my knees for the rest of my life." Geppetto, believing that all this lamentation was only another of the puppet's tricks, thought of a means of putting an end to it, and climbing up the wall, he got in at the window. He was very angry, and at first he did nothing but scold. But when he saw his Pinocchio lying on the ground and really without feet, he was quite overcome. He took him in his arms and began to kiss and caress him, and to say 1,000 endearing things to him. And as the big tears ran down his cheeks, he said, sobbing, "My little Pinocchio, how did you manage to burn your feet?" "I don't know, Papa, but it has been such a dreadful night that I shall remember it as long as I live. It thundered and lightened, and I was very hungry, and then the talking cricket said to me, 'It serves you right. You have been wicked, and you deserve it.' And I said to him, 'Take care, cricket.' And he said, 'You are a puppet, and you have a wooden head,' and I threw the handle of a hammer at him, and he died. But the fault was his, for I didn't wish to kill him, and the proof of it is that I put an earthenware saucer on a brazier of burning embers, but a chicken flew out and said, 'Adieu until we meet again,' and many compliments to all at home. And I got still more hungry, for which reason that little old man in a nightcap, opening the window, said to me, 'Come underneath, and hold out your hat,' and poured a basinful of water on my head, because asking for a little bread isn't a disgrace, is it? And I returned home at once, and because I was always very hungry, I put my feet on the brazier to dry them, and then you returned, and I found they were burnt off, and I'm always hungry, but I have no longer any feet. Oh, 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 oh!" And poor Pinocchio began to cry and to roar so loudly that he was heard 5 miles off. Geppetto, who from all this jumbled account had only understood one thing, which was that the puppet was dying of hunger, drew from his pocket 3 pears, and giving them to him, said, "These 3 pears were intended for my breakfast, but I will give them to you willingly. Eat them, and I hope they will do you good. If you wish me to eat them, be kind enough to peel them for me." "Peel them?" said Geppetto, astonished. "I should never have thought, my boy, that you are so dainty and fastidious. That is bad. In this world we should accustom ourselves from childhood to like and to eat everything, for there is no saying to what we may be brought. There are so many chances." "You are no doubt right," interrupted Pinocchio, "but I will never eat fruit that has not been peeled. I cannot bear rind." So good Geppetto peeled the 3 pears and put the rind on a corner of the table. Having eaten the first pear in 2 mouthfuls, Pinocchio was about to throw away the core, but Geppetto caught hold of his arm and said to him, "Do not throw it away. In this world, everything may be of use." "But core I am determined I will not eat," shouted the puppet, turning upon him like a viper. "Who knows? There are so many chances," repeated Geppetto without losing his temper. And so the 3 cores, instead of being thrown out of the window, were placed on the corner of the table together with the 3 rinds. Having eaten, or rather having devoured the 3 pears, Pinocchio yawned tremendously, and then said in a fretful tone, "I am as hungry as ever. But, my boy, I have nothing more to give you." "Nothing? Really nothing? I have only the rind and the cores of the 3 pears." "One must have patience," said Pinocchio. "If there is nothing else, I will eat a rind." And he began to chew it. At first he made a wry face, but then one after another he quickly disposed of the rinds, and after the rinds even the cores, and when he had eaten up everything he clapped his hands on his sides in his satisfaction and said joyfully, "Ah, now I feel comfortable." "You see now," observed Geppetto, "that I was right when I said to you that it did not do to accustom ourselves to be too particular or too dainty in our tastes. We can never know, my dear boy, what may happen to us. There are so many chances.